Hi, Zizaran here with another
build
for the upcoming Scourge expansion, and this is a special build for the Cohhilition, Carnage's community. This is an Occultist Spectral Helix with Plaguebearer. Plaguebearer is a very similar skill to Righteous Fire in a way, but poison, and Spectral Helix is similar to Blessed Hammer from Diablo 2. Really cool skill, and it should be an incredibly good starter. There's some like really cool items we can use early on this build. Looks very solid. Now for playing this build, I want to demonstrate and talk about it a little bit because not everybody has used Plaguebearer before. Plaguebearer is an integral part of the build, and it basically builds up, and you can see in the top left corner that it's building up charges. So you later unleash these charges. Sometimes it's a little bit wonky and you have to like click activate it once for it to start gathering charges at the start of the map, but it's basically charging up depending on how much you're poisoning. So you really want to have high poison chance, obviously. Once you have this filled up, you release it, it makes an aura around you, basically similar to Righteous Fire, and it's just insanely strong. And this feels really good, and that's why you're seeing all the purple explosions because of the Occultist Profane Bloom, and that's like a really cool way to play. The Spectral Helix, and that is going to be what we're using for single target and for building these stacks. But then for clearing, you are hopefully very often running around with Plaguebearer, and things are just vaporizing before you. Now, with just something like a Wasp Nest, which is very, very cheap and easy to get, it's over 1 million damage. So it's pretty solid, and then it should be able to be pushed even further up to 2 or 3 million damage at the end game. As normal, we have our step-by-step leveling tree showing you what to take early on, and we are actually going to be doing a swap in this, a little bit of a gem swap, which we'll talk about once we get to skills. But as you can see, we have loads of different trees, so you know exactly where to put points at what points, and there's not a huge respec in this either, which is really nice. And then we have two different setups. We have one that is using Ghost Dance, and that is really nice when you have a little bit of energy shield, like anywhere from 500 to 1000 or more. That will make our evasion give back loads of energy shield whenever we are getting hit. Then we have another setup with Xibaqua. This is a glorious Vanity timeless jewel. I want to explain quickly what this does. So that's just for this here, and it gives you Divine Flesh. All damage taken bypasses energy shield, so your energy shield is dead at this point. It does nothing. But what it does do is that 50% of your elemental damage is taken as chaos. Now, you can get your elemental resist all the way up to 90, and then it's really, really good. But even just with taking this, it's already at 82 and really strong with that. And, you know, the more max chaos stress you can get, the better. One thing that this is really strong against is penetrating damage. So, for example, the Shaper, the balls that he sends out, they penetrate cold resist. However, when you take that damage as chaos, they no longer penetrate. So it's very strong against damage types like that. As you can see, we like don't turn on anything crazy in PoB, and obviously, of course, this is damage against Cyrus. Against like normal monsters, it's going to do crazy amounts more. We try to make sure that we always underestimate what builds can do. Early on, leveling for this build isn't going to be the best. It's going to be pretty okay because you're using Blight into Bane, and that's obviously a pretty decent way to level. Blight on its own, it's kind of whatever. You can also throw in like Contagion. You could even use Essence Drain and stuff, just whatever you can to get to Bane. Once you get to Bane, very straightforward. I've included a 6-link gem just in case you get a Tabula, but here would be like the 4-link you'd want. And you're just using Bane and Despair, and then you're just going around and cursing monsters to death. It's really, really nice. Now, as soon as you get your first Ascendancy, which is going to be Profane Bloom, very often builds have to use Blasphemy to make this work. However, for this, since we're using Bane for leveling, well, you're just exploding things and getting those cool explosions. So that's really nice. Other than that, the leveling setup, very simple. You want a Wither Totem with Spell Totem, and once you hit 38, you want to get Multi-Totem and faster casting. Fit what you can early. You're obviously going to be strapped for sockets on day one, and you can ditch the Blight setup once we get the Bane. You're using Malevolence. You can use Skitterbots until Malevolence. I think your mana is going to be pretty tight until then. You can also experiment with Clarity. Vitality as well is an okay thing to use early when you're not using your mana much. And then we have a Flame Dash with Arcane Surge. Try to keep it at a low level so that it's always being used every cast. I usually just keep it at level 1. And then once it's level 20, I have it at level 5, the Arcane Surge. Withering Step is very big. Basically, what this does is it adds Wither stacks to the enemy. Really good for just using when you're on rare monsters or the unique boss to help Wither stack up even more stacks. Just as a quick example of how much the difference is between 0 and 15 wither stacks, we can see our DPS on the left goes from 700k to 1.1 million. So it's a very, very large difference. And that is also without, for example, corruption, which is an insanely strong annoyant for this build with even more effective withered. So I want to talk a little bit about the gear. Wasp Nest, really, really good for this build. You also get poison chance. You can see that you get loads of flat damage. Like, Wasp Nest is usually pretty easy to find and can be fairly cheap. Early on before that, you just want a Fizz Gemini Claw, and you see it's not like the end of the world damage-wise. And another thing that's pretty important for leveling Fizz builds, and we're going to be swapping it around Act 6 when you are able to get all like the poison nodes, because we don't really want to swap before we're able to have close to 100 chance to poison. And one of the poison masteries is extremely good for leveling. What I want to show you is the rustic sash recipe for making Fizz weapons. So for example, here you have a rare rustic sash. You can use a blue as well. And then you have whatever weapon, ideally a claw, try to get a fairly decent high item level 1, and then a blacksmith whetstone. And that gives you up to 64% increased physical damage. Obviously we can now use an augment. And if sometimes the league mechanic gives a lot of currency like regals and stuff, other times regals can be really rare. But if you're able to use a regal and then craft flat physical, then you have a pretty good weapon just with that recipe. Now, another thing that's very, very good for swapping early is having your mastery be this one. Poisons you inflict on non-poison enemies deal 300% damage. For long fights and bosses, this isn't going to make a big difference, but it can feel really nice on clearing because, well, then they'll die to that one poison. However, again, the second one, third one, etc. will not do anything. So we generally end up not using this at the end game, but it could always be an okay for clearing if for whatever reason you are low on damage. For the end game, you can see here is another example of a really, actually fairly reasonable to get claw, where we just have generic damage over time multiplier, the high tier flat added chaos, and then you can multi-mod the other two, which is 2 exalted orbs, and it's 20 attack speed and chaos damage over time multiplier. And you can see that this is a decent chunk more than a wasp nest. For a shield, it's just going to be things like life. Spell suppression is always good, obviously. And the more spell suppression you can get on gear, the more we're going to be able to get away from the tree. We're taking quite a lot of spell suppression nodes on the tree. But yeah, again, saving points there because it's a very tight tree, very low on points. Getting that on gear would be great. And for a helmet, using loathing essences is really great. Especially life-based ones are obviously very reasonable to craft. You just need to hit either some resist and an open prefix or hitting a life roll. On the status guide, we don't really care about much. It's literally just going to be like life early on. We'll have another endgame setup too to see what we're going to like really juice with on this build. But getting that Corvicius to unveil, 10% life as extra energy shield is really nice because of the fact that we're using ghost dance. So we have a lot of evasion and we want to have that extra energy shield. So that's going to keep pinging back. And we get a similar way to how like Essence Drain Tricksters would have been played in the past. The Embalmer, really, really nice for our build. It's got a large amount of life. It's got flat chaos damage. It's also got the chaos resist and the poison duration. At Zeri Step, honestly, these are going to be one of the most used boots this league. So many people are going to be trying to get these for a chance to suppress spell damage. Outside of this, you can just get, you know, some basic two-tone boots with life and resist and movement speed. For your amulet, there's a few things you can do. It's pretty easy to get a Elder amulet with damage over time multiplier and life. However, a little bit later in the league, if you're able to get an Impressence with Despair has no reservation if cast as an aura, that means you can run Blasphemy Despair for free. And this is really nice because we do get one extra curse through Malediction. And if you aren't using that, you're basically going to use self-cast Despair on bosses just for extra single target. But being able to like automatically run those are going to feel really, really nice. Another alternative to not self-casting Despair is getting a Despair on hit ring. These can be crafted on item level 75 Hunter rings. Also, you can find them in Delve. There will be nodes that will be like purple and it'll say contains chaos items. And whenever these have boxes that say contain jewelry items, you have a decent chance of finding a ring like that. A Stygian Vice, pretty great, especially when you're finding things like chain belts, leather belts, etc. Getting this unveiled on it will be 200 energy shield per second while a rare or unique is nearby, or you can craft it on other belts for 150. And 150 regen, that's actually a pretty good buffer against degens. Another thing that might end up helping with mana issues would be jewels like things with physical attack damage leashes mana, +2 mana gain for each enemy by hit, and you're potentially using a claw with 14 mana gain on hit. Then you might be very easy able to drop your mana flask. As well as resistance though goes, just make sure your resist cap. It doesn't really matter what piece of gear you have resist on, and we don't try to include that. Literally just get resist cap, and remember that you lose resist after killing Kitava in Act 5 and in Act 10. So let's do the normal Q&A we do at the end of build guides to like solve problems and help people with that. Socket pressure should be pretty good on this build. Like there shouldn't be too many gems. And you have, for example, Ancestral Protector should be an easy thing to drop if you need to. And if you're wondering, we're using Ancestral Protector for the attack speed buff. Can the player have mana issues? So this should be pretty okay on mana. You have so many options, especially the fact that claws give you mana gained on hit is so nice. And you can get the leech from a Radiant Jewel as well. On top of that, it should feel really good mana-wise. Useful leveling uniques. There's not that many like uniques and stuff we really want to use on this. Embalmer and Wasp Nest is like the main two ones you're really looking for. Other than that, you're just looking for things crafted with, for example, Essence of Contempt would be really good for some easy early weapons. Some things that would be really nice for this build early, especially if you're playing on Trade League, is while you're playing the Bane portion, try to look out for 2 Driftwood ones or whatever with +1 level of Chaos Spell skill gems. This doesn't require the gem to be socketed, and getting gem levels early on for Bane is absolutely huge. And another thing that's extra nice with the leveling portion, we aren't getting that many damage nodes. However, you can just over level a little bit more than normal. And each time you're leveling up that Bane gem, you're getting basically 12 to 15% more damage. So a huge damage boost. Let's talk a little bit about the sustain and the defense on this build. So we have a okay amount of life. We have a large amount of spell suppression. We should be able to get 100% spell suppression on this. That means that boss spells aren't going to do that much. All the dodge as well, coupled with the ghost dance, is really nice. So that means that every time a monster hits you, you're going to get energy shield based on your evasion back. So running Grace is really nice for that. And especially for bosses that are like longer, you're not going to need that many utility flasks. So you, for example, an Awakener or something like that, you could go in with 3 or 4 life flasks. For like financial hurdles and things like that, the only thing that would be a problem is if a shit ton of people are trying to use Wasp Nest at the same time. Even though it's a fairly common unique, it might spike to like 20 to 25 chaos. At that point, probably just make your own claw. It's not the end of the world, and then work on making a more expensive one or hope that it drops in price. But don't pay like an absolute crazy amount for a Wasp Nest. It's pretty replaceable. The bandits for this build is you kill them all, you get the skill point. Pantheons for this build is going to be Brine King and Garukan. That's also going to help with your freeze immunity and things like shock immune. And instead of Embalmer, you could also get gloves that you're crafting 40% shock and chill immunity. This is especially good if you're focusing more on survival, for example on hardcore. So for early Annoints, Cloth and Chain would be a nice one to help with resist. Graceful Assault will be a nice one to get onslaught and things like that earlier if you only have 1 black oil. However, at the endgame, Corruption is pretty cheap. It's a red, black, black, and insanely strong. Basically makes your Wither stacks a lot more powerful, and Wither is a very important part for the build's damage. Thank you guys so much for watching the build guide. I hope it helps, and I hope you have an amazing time in Scourge League. Good luck to Cohh and everyone in the community. Thank you so much for watching the video. Sub if you like it, but more importantly, try to die less than I do.